I'd like to call the Transportation and Commerce Committee meeting to order. Please call the roll.
Alderman Moore,
Here.
Alderman Vaccaro,
Present.
Alderman Cone,
Present.
Alderwoman Howard, Alderman Muhammad, Alderwoman Middlebrook, Alderwoman Davis,
Present.
President Reed. We have 4 present, Madam Chair.
Thank you. This morning, we have 3 bills before us. We're gonna hear those 3 bills. We're also gonna do a briefing on Fly 314. We're gonna give an overall presentation on the time frame of where we are today. So basically, we're gonna give you a chronicle of when the contract was signed to actually do the exploration process towards privatization or not. And also, we are going to get an update on where we are with the communications. Right now, that's probably the most important thing that we can do, is to make sure that our community is informed. They know that there is a process in place, and they have an opportunity to talk one-on-one with someone in the beginning, not a year later. So as we move forward in this process, we will also look at how this committee should be in the forefront, and most especially, how we need to be present at public meetings so that we can hear from our general public firsthand on how they feel. As we move forward today, if there are any questions that any of the aldermen have that are outside of the committee, I will also be taking those. So let's start off with Board Bill number 98, and I see that Tommy is going to present.
Good morning, committee members.
Good morning.
I will present Board Bill 98. We are requesting your approval for the implementation of a new accounting system to replace our current antiquated access-based system, which was built in-house more than 15 years ago. We have very knowledgeable accounting resources within 15 months that are retiring, and those resources are critical to converting to a new accounting system. Those same resources are the only support mechanism for our current system. A committee of airport IT and finance personnel evaluated several systems, which included N4, New World, Tyler Technologies, and Microsoft Dynamics 365. The airport also participated in a forum with other airport CFOs regarding airport accounting systems, and based upon the results of that forum, it was discovered that about 23% of the airports were successfully using a version of the Microsoft Dynamics system. The IT and Finance Airport Committee recommends that we move forward with the implementation of the Microsoft Dynamics accounting system. The airlines approved this on July 23rd, and the Airport Commission approved this on July 11th. At this time, we respectfully request your approval for this project.
Okay, let's see if any of our committee members have any questions. Alderman Moore?
This airport group that put together, that accepted this, who were they?
That included myself, our accounting team, our airport assistant director, our accounting managers, and several members of the IT team, the IT director, and several of his key managers.
And when did you approve it?
Around about July timeframe, because that's when we presented it also to the Airport Commission.
Supposing we say no,
Then we had to go back to the drawing board.
you guys don't just proceed on.
We tend not to, but we will
But
have to
you
go back
can.
to the drawing board. We can.
That's why I asked, why did you come to the board to ask us for favorable consideration? And you can do it anyway.
Well, we don't want to
This
move
procedure?
forward. No, we don't want to move forward with anything that the Board of Aldermen or this Transportation and Commerce Committee doesn't see fit. So we would definitely would not proceed with this project if you say no to this project. But at this point in time, we do have valuable resources that are retiring in 15 months, and we cannot continue to utilize this system without the resources that we have
How
currently.
long have you been knowing this is an antiquated system, since you got on board?
No, we've had this system for more than 15 years.
I'm saying, for it to be antiquated, you discovered that it was antiquated. It was working prior to this, right?
No, when I came on board, the IT team.
He's all right, Rhonda.
Okay.
Yeah, when I came on board, the IT team had actually put together like kind of a 5 to 10 year long-term strategic plan on all accounting systems, well, all systems throughout the airport. And one of the key systems that they were looking at was the accounting system. We do need a new accounting system that does not rely just on 2 people within our department for support.
Anything you want to add?
Well, I think, we would have replaced this a number of years ago, had we had the opportunity at the time financially. But as we've looked, as we've morphed and moved forward, we look at those things that are critical and that we now have funding available for. And this is one of those items that's critical and the funding is now available. So, with all Antonio's input as well, we think this is something that's going to keep the airport operational and functional. Without it, we have concerns about our ability to really keep the accounting system and payroll system functionable.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Is that it, Mr. Alderman Moore?
That's it.
All right, sir. Alderman Vaccaro?
No questions.
Alderman Cone?
So this is basically an amendment to the project list that was previously approved,
Yes.
correct? So why, like on the fiscal note for the bill, it says that there's no additional cost beyond what was, already appropriated in the city's budget. So if this is adding something to the scope of the projects that were already approved, then wouldn't there be an increase in the amount of the projects, or is there another project that's come under budget, or?
This is actually coming from ordinance from projects that were under budget many years ago. And so that's why there is no additional cost to the projects or to our O&M costs.
Okay. I have no other questions.
Okay. Alderman Muhammad? Alderman?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. On this schedule here, Exhibit A, all these different projects that you have listed, so these are already previously approved. The only thing you're doing is adding on a new accounting system.
Yes. So anytime you have a public works project, you do have to have an ordinance, and we would have to either perform a new ordinance or update that ordinance with a new project.
Okay. So going back to Alderman Moore's question, so you basically can move forward without approval from this committee or the Board of Aldermen,
I'd say we would not move forward if this committee says no.
but can you?
Technically, no. I mean, we need the Board of Aldermen's approval on anything that we move forward with. This isn't an ordinance, and so if it's amending the ordinance, we need this TNC's approval to do this. So we would not move forward if we did not have the approval.
Okay, you keep saying you would not move forward.
Well, we can't.
Can you theoretically?
In
can
my
you move
understanding is no, we cannot.
forward?
We
You
have
said
to.
yes, you said no.
My understanding from the legal department is that we would have to have the approval before we could move forward, because we are amending in an ordinance.
Does this also need approval from the Airport Commission?
It already has the
Yes.
approval of the Airport Commission. That happened in July.
July the 11th, the airport commission approved, and the airlines approved on July 23rd.
Okay. So what is the accounting system now?
It's an in-house built system. It's called Bentech. It was built about 15 years ago. It's an access database system.
It's a very outdated system.
Okay. I have no further questions, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. I think just for a little bit of clarity, I always need the opportunity to educate the public. So give us the 3-minute version of how we go into planning. So when you submit your 5-year plan and all these items are listed, we have some indication of where some of the funds come from. Just share with us how long this has been in the planning and how it falls out each project.
Right. Well, we did the new use and lease agreement, which is a 5-year use and lease agreement. That's from fiscal year 17 through fiscal year
2016 to 2021.
2021. And when we did that, the airport team spent about 18 months looking at where do we think we need to be for the next 5 years and all of the infrastructure issues. And when we put that list together, obviously it was a fairly lengthy list, then we negotiated with the air carriers. For the first time in many years, we did a pre-approved $170 million CIP plan with the carriers. Obviously, they have to also look and see that these are things that they think they need for the airport. It is a crystal ball to some extent as you move on, and during that 5-year window, things are going to change. Maybe, runway infrastructure's change. There may be different edicts that come out from the FAA. So you know that it is somewhat, but you try to stick with the plan. And then the process is along the way, if we have additional things that come up that we need, we go back to them, we get MII approval from them, and then we, move forward in that direction again with the, all of the approval process. So it is somewhat of a fluid CIP. I would say 90% stays intact, but as things change, you have to be able to adapt to that. So that's what we do.
All right, I thank you for that. I also wanted to reiterate that you were in consultation with the other airport systems that work together for improvement. And so you were consulting with other airports, and it gave you a clearer and better picture of exactly what you were going into without going into it blindly. And just for the sake of folks understanding, the system that you are using is absolutely, positively antiquated. It's more like it's a programmable calculator, and you really need more than that. Okay. Are there any questions, Alderwoman Rice? No question? Okay. So,
I entertain a motion that
And I'll
we
second
pass
it.
Board Bill 98 out with the due pass recommendation.
And I'll second that.
moved by Alderman Cone, second by Alderman Fowler. Please call the roll.
Alderman Moore,
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro,
Aye.
Alderman Cone,
Aye.
Alderwoman Howard, Alderman Muhammad, Alderwoman Middlebrook, Alderwoman Davis,
Aye.
President Reed. You have 5 votes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Board Bill 98 is passed. Let's move on to Board Bill number 102.
I have the pleasure of presenting Board Bill 102. This is actually really great news. The airport received a grant award up to $350,000 for marketing and promotion of air service at the airport. The Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission awards funding for the promotion of domestic or international commercial air service in the state of Missouri when funds are available. Funding for this program is made available by the Commission when proceeds from the jet fuel and aviation fuel taxes exceed more than $4.5 million, but not more than $6.5 million. The airport will be required to provide matching funds of totaling about $38,000, and the amount from the Commission will total $350,000 as a grant. The grant will be used to promote our airport as a local airport of choice and promote the entire St. Louis region as an attractive destination for domestic and international travel. At this time, we request your approval to enter into an agreement to receive grant funding from the Missouri Highway and Transportation Commission.
That is exciting news. Alderman Moore, you have questions?
You said you received grant funding and you get 4.5 to 6.5 million.
Oh, $350,000 for this year.
So what happened to the balance of that money?
The balance of the money goes to other airports. The Missouri Highway and Transportation Commission gives funding to other airports too.
So it's just, our portion is 350,000.
Yes, for this
We-
fiscal year.
And we did get the largest portion, Alderman Moore, on that. So the $4.5 million, the state has to receive at least $4.5 million in jet fuel aviation tax fund. Otherwise, this funding is not available. And you do not get that funding, you get a portion of that funding. So they allocated, I think the total amount, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it was about $1 million. We received $350,000 of that. That was the largest grant issued of any airport in the state of Missouri.
How many airports do we have in the state of Missouri?
Well, you have 5. You've got St. Louis Lambert, you've got Kansas City, you have Joplin, you have Springfield, you have Kirksville, Spirit, so 6 actually, I guess. I think those are the 6 that usually participate in this program.
So do they divide that 4.5 between the 6 of them?
Yeah, the 4.5 is just the number that you
That
have
they
to
collect.
receive in order for them to release a portion
Okay.
of that to the state. So there wasn't 4.5 in the original grant. I think it came to about $1 million. As I said, ours was 350,000. Kansas City actually didn't receive any of the monies this year. You have to justify your program. You have to put forward how you would use the money. I think Springfield, Missouri, I wish I had the numbers in front. I think they had about 125,000 maybe.
I think you're right.
And then Joplin had some, Kirksville had some, and so this shows the, not even my glasses, but this shows the amount given to the different airports.
Yep, Springfield got
Yeah, I
175,000.
see. I just wanted to hear it from your mouth.
Okay, well, I have to have my glasses on to read my papers.
Okay.
But no, we typically, when this grant has been made available, and there were a couple of years when it wasn't because they didn't meet the sales tax, you know, we're the airport that produces the largest amount of jet fuel sale in the state, so we have always gotten the biggest portion of the grant.
That's all I have.
Thank you.
All right, sir. Alderman Vaccaro,
No questions.
okay. Alderman Cone.
Just one, so, the money that we're receiving for the grant is going to be used for marketing programs. Is that the types of programs where we're talking about, you know, attracting new airlines into the region and advertising them, you know, when they come into St. Louis or what have you, or is there a separate marketing program that we're talking about here?
It's part of it. I mean, we spend much more dollars than this on the overall marketing for the airport, but this is a good way to offset some of that cost. So we actually have to expend this money and then we get it reimbursed to us. So it comes back in the form of a reimbursement after the
Okay.
fact. But you know, what we try and do, and it's very important to the state of Missouri that we do focus on trying to attract growth from around the region. So we will do partnership events in places like where we have some of our essential air service markets. So in Kirksville, in Cape Girardeau, in Quincy, areas that we may not think of our MSA just in general, but we really try to get an outreach because we know that those customers have other airports that they can choose. Maybe it'd be Chicago, or it'd be Memphis, or it'd be Kansas City. So we really try to do a lot of events in those regions to highlight the opportunities out of St. Louis and the network that we have out of St. Louis. And then we also do a local, we have our Big Air Partnership event that's coming up actually in October. We do it once a year. We bring a lot of the travel agencies and a lot of the carriers in for a 2-day event to highlight everything that's going on at the airport, to highlight the connectivity out of the airport and the reasons. So yeah, it's used in a wide range of ways, but it really is to focus on this particular part of the money is really to help focus on bringing people that are outside of our MSA so that we can connect those through our airport.
It's kind of funny that they're using our taxpayer dollars generated in the St. Louis City area to then give the St. Louis City area a grant to advertise to people outside of St. Louis, but that's a whole other story. I don't have any other questions.
Okay.
Very Missouri.
Yeah, Alderman Muhammad,
No questions.
okay, Alderman Rice. All right.
Madam Chairperson?
Yes, sir.
Just a question, it's not our business, but why would a place like Kansas City opt out of receiving funds?
I can't answer that question. Most years they have participated. I don't know if it was a matter of this year where they just didn't have the personnel or timing. As in all grants, it's very time consuming. You have to write up a very aggressive dissertation as to how the money's going to be used. It takes a lot of time to do all the reimbursements and the requirements. So it is manpower intensive. So I don't know whether they just didn't have the manpower to do that and chose not to, or if they just missed the deadlines. But this is the first year that we've seen where they have not participated.
Well, it's a good program.
It's a great program.
Okay. Money, anytime money is involved is good.
Thank you. A motion to approve?
I move that we pass out Board Bill 102 with the due pass recommendation,
I'll second that.
previous rule.
Hearing no objection, Board Bill 102 is passed.
Thank you.
Board Bill 104. Who's presenting Board Bill 104?
That's not us. We don't know.
It's
No,
the
it's-
Port Authority.
I'm sorry,
Port
Port Authority.
Authority.
They're not here, and they asked for this. I just realized that. Okay. I'll go ahead and present on Board Bill 104. For most of this past year or so, we've been looking at the opportunity for the St. Louis City Port District to have improvement and expansion and expanding the boundaries of the district. And this is basically what we're doing here with this. We're recommending an adoption of the expansion of the Port District to include all of the property within the city limits. I do sit on the Port Authority. I was there when we had the conversation about this and understand that we will have opportunities to generate additional revenue and also have some additional activity along the port as well. Most of this probably should have been considered 10 years ago, but it wasn't. But we're here today, and I do support it. Any questions, Alderman Moore?
Where would you extend? Is it Bridgeton?
Well, we go that far now, but we don't necessarily provide services or have any leases or lease opportunities that we probably should have had a long time ago.
We don't lease it now?
We do lease some spots now, but not all.
So what are they connecting the dots or something?
Yes, sir. That's exactly right.
Do you have a map of that?
I wish I did have a map. I made an assumption after I was called and asked to make sure it was on the agenda that someone would be here. I don't carry the map with me all the time, so.
Well, I wish we knew where the dots were connected, see how much mass was being formulated together. See how much we was putting together and what.
Well, one of the things that, and how I could probably keep it as simple as possible, is that we have pretty much only looked at our boundaries, whereas the port runs through the city and the county, as you just mentioned, going along past Bridgeton. So all we're doing is like you said, connecting the dots, making sure that we now start aggressively looking at those opportunities.
And all those opportunities are out by the airport or?
No, it wouldn't just be there.
I'd like to know how much land we're receiving, how much we're connecting,
Well,
just for my satisfaction.
I do understand. Can I send that to you?
Sure.
I will have them send you the map and show you everything along there.
Show me what we have and what
Yes, sir.
we're gonna receive.
We can do that. We can definitely do that. And I think it's very interesting anyway. It's been a while since we've had the opportunity for the aldermen to go out and take a tour of the port area and look at some of the projects out there. And now that we have some new aldermen, I think it's time to do it again. And so I'll make it even better where you can see it up close and personal. I'll have them set something up before the weather gets bad.
And we're not using eminent domain by any means to take it
Oh,
back.
no, sir. We're not trying to take anything.
Okay, we already on it.
You already got it,
All right.
okay? All right, Alderman Vaccaro,
No questions.
Alderman Cone.
So this is just an expansion of the port district itself as it already exists. So the port, if I remember correctly, the maps that I've seen in the past, you know, the Port Authority basically runs along the riverfront. And then, you know, for a few blocks to the west of the river. So this is basically extending it all the way to the city limits.
All the way to the city limits.
So what benefit does that provide? Because I'm trying to read, you know, it's just the language in the bill is just specific to extending it to the city limits, but the synopsis in here is, you know, the type of impact that it would have. They say that the expansion of the port district would allow the Port Authority to participate in development and infrastructure projects throughout the entire city. But what type of development and infrastructure projects are they going to be doing? And do they have to be, I would imagine that if they're doing them, that they would have to be related to some sort of port-related activity,
Well,
right?
yeah, as you've said on the Port Authority too. So, what we have is We have a number of storage opportunities on the port. We have some docking opportunities on the port as they move forward. We think that there are some other opportunities available, and we also have a marketing plan as well for the Port Authority. And it all has a lot to do with just being more responsible in the assets that we have. There's more opportunity to make money there, and that's what we're trying to do. And you know, normally, it's not our businesses that are there, it's other businesses.
Right.
And so we'll be looking for new lease opportunities.
So, with the expansion of the district to be a citywide district, is that similar to how St. Louis County is structured, or is St. Louis County similar to how we're currently structured, where their port authority is only along the waterways? So, I mean, waterways being more than just the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, St. Louis County has a very large creek system, which St. Louis City has a smaller version of. But like, are our creek systems included? I mean, in terms of like, are they looking at an overall plan in terms of how to, manage, our systems in partnership with places like MSD and, just development in general? I mean, we have the River de Pere as well that, is a, major kind of tributary, if you will, that runs through the city. So I'm just curious if they have any ideas in terms of what they're planning on doing with the expansion of the district, and not just, I mean, it sounds great, but it would be nice to know specifically, like, if they have anything that they wanna try and work
The
on.
way it was explained to us and the way I understand it is that we want to make sure that we have the opportunity to determine any new opportunities along the entire pathway of the district until we meet St. Louis County. So whatever that is or may be and how we can do it. One of the things I had talked about is, I don't understand why we don't have a wharf activity, something with entertainment, restaurants, all of that. I don't understand that, why we don't have it. So there are a number of things that could be done, and now, once we put this in place, we are giving them the rights to start moving forward and aggressively looking for those opportunities.
Okay. It would be nice to still have them come in even if we
Oh,
pass this.
I think it's a great
just
idea.
to
Have them
some
come
more
in and make a
conversations.
presentation, absolutely. So I'll make sure that happens, as well as we have a physical tool, okay?
Great.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, so Alderman Muhammad, do you have questions?
No, a comment. I've read the language of the bill. I really don't understand what it's doing or why it's doing it. It's not really specific to me. Honestly, I only know what I'm voting on when I vote for this. I'm following your expertise and your guidance on it, which is why
Yes,
I will
sir.
pass it out, but I have no idea what it's doing or the benefit that comes with it.
Okay.
But I will vote for it.
I thank you, and I shall make sure that we have a much clearer understanding in the very near future. It won't take long either. But I appreciate your acceptance. Alderwoman Rice?
Actually, I did have a couple of questions on
Go
this one,
ahead.
because this, so this is expanding the Port Authority, not just along the riverfront, but to the entire city
Great.
district, right? So where does the funding come from to fund the Port Authority? Like, right now, there's 2 staff on the Port Authority, right? Will we be expanding staff on that? Like, the fiscal note doesn't say
We
that there's
won't be.
anything.
No, we won't.
Okay, so it's, so what,
So the funding for the Port Authority comes from lease agreements that they have along the riverfront.
okay,
So the Port Authority actually owns property along the riverfront and then also manages several lease agreements
okay.
that are
Still got that in
fairly
there.
valuable to the city along the Mississippi River.
So if we're expanding to the whole of the city though, then where does the ownership and ability to lease property that,
It
like,
doesn't change ownership of property.
Right,
It only
so that's why
expands
I'm
the district
confused.
and the authority of the district to be able to invest monies received through current arrangements along the riverfront and to other parts of the city.
Yeah,
okay,
it's a proving responsibility,
okay.
yeah.
It just seems like we have,
Oversight.
okay. It just seems like we have so many different economic development sort of agencies working over things, and this is just another layer to throw on top of that,
So
and
the
it's,
Port Authority is part of SLDC.
right. So would they take over some responsibilities from SLDC, or would this be, so this would be
It's
another
already-
layer?
It's already there.
It's
Okay.
already
Yeah,
there.
they already
Okay.
do it,
Okay,
It's
Yeah.
just expanding the scope of the
Yeah.
district,
okay,
yeah.
but it's not actually adding additional work per
No.
se into
Okay.
the district.
okay. And just, since with the authority come different responsibilities, I'm in agreement with Alderman Mohammed that it's very confusing as to like what the goal is
No.
from that, so,
No, it's not giving them any new responsibility.
okay,
This is what they already do. They already lease
right,
to different people who come in and want services. So when you see the barges going down the river,
Right.
a lot of them also lease from us because they have storage space
Right.
there.
right,
So their responsibilities are the same. Nothing changes except the scope,
okay,
the width, and identify that we want to exercise the opportunities that are already there that we haven't done.
okay,
And we still have to approve any, like even lease changes,
Oh,
everything else. They all come, everything comes back to us, no matter what.
okay,
I mean, it's not,
Yeah.
So for instance, like if they, and this is why I was asking the question about what their plans are to do with the expansion of the district.
right,
Yeah, the expansion of the district itself seems, rather exciting, only because they're able to then take, the investments that they have along the riverfront and be able to invest those into other parts of the city to help support port activity and commercial activity along our riverfront. So if, let's say, I'm just going to use the river De Pere as an example, because it's a large river that's within the boundaries of the city, that currently isn't underneath the purview of the Port Authority. So this would now expand the district of the Port Authority to also have, the river De Pere as part of that. So if they wanna take, funds from, their current lease agreements and invest those into development along the river De Pere, they would be able to do that now, which currently they're not able to do because the river De Pere isn't within the boundaries of their Port Authority district.
okay.
So the Port Authority
yeah.
district is very narrowly
Right,
defined right now, is basically the area along the riverfront
Mhm.
and a few blocks to the west.
okay,
So, but it runs from basically the panhandle of the city up at the northern end, all the way down to Carondelet.
okay, okay. Yeah. Thanks for the
Okay.
opportunity.
Yeah. I think that, I think this is well overdue, and I was excited we finally got to that point. And all the concerns that we've had about revenue for the city of St. Louis, this is one small, minute opportunity to gain some additional revenue as well. And I'm hoping that all the areas that most people had not looked at, they'll start looking at it, because we could do some things there. I want to again thank Alderman Mohammed for his, I'm gonna say, his acceptance of this. So I'd like to have a motion for Board Bill 104.
I move that we pass Board Bill 104 out with a due pass recommendation.
and I'll second that.
Previous roll.
Moved, second, no objection to previous roll. Board Bill 104 is passed. And I thank you. So now we're gonna move on to our presentation for Fly 314. Hopefully you will having a better understanding of where we are and just a little bit of how we got there, because I think that's been thoroughly explored for the good and or the bad in the past 6 months. Yes, sir.
Madam Chairperson, we have to go make a quorum and then we'll be back.
Oh, we still got 4.
See,
Yeah, and
We're
this is
not-
the,
We're not voting on anything, so.
yeah, we still have 4 people. We have a quorum.
I want to hear the good news.
Oh, yes,
I'll be
absolutely.
back.
And this is a presentation, so we're not gonna have to take a vote on anything. We're
I
gonna,
understand, but I want to know how.
oh, no, go ahead, I understand.
I want to know how
But-
to do my vote.
Because Mohammed's
I'll
coming
be
back.
back.
He's coming back. Okay. So the first thing I wanted to do is, I wanted to give a little bit, a few guidelines on the presentation. Most people have had an opportunity to read and or hear some parts of Fly 314, which is an exploration process to determine whether or not we will take the opportunity to privatize our airport here in St. Louis. And again, I'm gonna say it so everybody understands it. I said whether or not. So no decision has been made. This is an exploration, and some people know it as an operational audit. Some people look at it as directing an opportunity to outsource part of your work that you do. It is known in many different ways. But what it is not, what it will not be, is we are not selling the airport. By law, we cannot sell the airport. And so I wanted to make sure before we got into this that that is very clear. The FAA has been here and made a presentation to our committee and made that very clear that you cannot sell this airport. They also made it very clear that they will be oversight in this process, and they are part of the approval of whatever we may decide to do, if we decide to do anything. Aside from that, it's been made very clear, I hope, and if it hasn't, we will continue to reiterate that this process requires a number of government bodies to have a vote and decide what we're going to do. So yes, we do have an organization that is assisting in the process. Yes, we do have a working group from the city of St. Louis, which includes part of the legislative body, the executive branch, and others. But at the end of the day, no one entity in the city of St. Louis can make any decision on what may or may not happen with the airport. The mayor cannot make a decision by herself. The Board of Aldermen cannot make a decision by themselves. This transportation committee cannot make a decision by themselves. E&A cannot make a decision by themselves. The airports that service Lambert cannot make a decision by themselves. So all the airlines there, they cannot make a decision by themselves. Nor can the FAA come in and say, this is what you will do, because I think it's the best, by themselves. It requires a collective opportunity. So before we have a presentation done, we want to make sure that we do not yell out anything. I'm not taking any questions from the public. Only aldermen will be allowed to ask questions. I'm going to take this and it'll be a 1-hour session. And then if necessary, we will continue. Give me a list of the items that you may, aldermen, give me a list of the items that you may still have concern for, and we will come back and clear those up for you. And so I believe we're going to start off with Stephanie. You want to come up and introduce yourself?
Sure.
And you are going to explain to us how you were involved and where you are in your project.
Good morning,
Good morning.
To all. My name is Stephanie Lewis. I'm the Vice President with Grow Missouri. And actually, we have two representatives that will be joining us today. Glenn, who is really going to give you an overview of our group, our committee, and what we're doing. Lawan is also handling our outreach efforts, and so he will be providing you with an overview of that as well. Each of the members of our advisory team are also assigned to a working group so that we work with members of the airport, the Board of Aldermen, and as well as the city. So we have members of our team that are also aligned with those individuals to ensure that we have a fair and due process in our recommendations to the city. So with that, I will turn it over to Glenn, who will provide an overview of this project.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. So my name is Glenn Muskowski. I work with the independent investment bank Moelis & Company. We've been retained as part of the broader team to help advise the city on the consideration of a public-private partnership with respect to the airport. We were retained formally in June after a selection process that resulted in us being selected. And as Alderwoman Davis has said, our primary goal is to help the city determine whether or not it would like to proceed with a potential public-private partnership in connection with the airport. No decisions have been made to proceed. It's our understanding, our expectation that all continues to be the city's decision to make on whether or not we proceed with even launching a process, not to mention closing a process. And as with all these kinds of processes, what happens first is a lengthy preparation phase, which is the phase that we are in right now, which is conducting diligence, beginning the work of interacting with the community to explain the process that we are undertaking, to garner feedback from the community, which LaJuan will talk about a little bit as well, and to make sure that when the time comes for the city to decide whether or not to launch a process, that it is armed with all the information that it needs and can benefit from to inform any decision it makes whether to proceed or not proceed. And as we see it, that information is a combination of things that are financially related in terms of what kind of proceeds could result from the transaction versus what might result under continued public sector stewardship of the airport. The second is what areas of improvement might result for the airport in terms of its operations and its customer experience. And third, what kind of economic and community development can result under a public-private partnership for the airport, for the region, and for the city. And those three things that I just mentioned are the three priorities that the city has identified in its application to the FAA, and that we have communicated preliminarily to potential market participants to help get them focused on the things that they might need to focus on to meet the desires of the city, again, to the extent the city decides to launch a process. So to circle back a bit, we're in the preparation phase right now. The overall time frame for a process, again, to the extent the city decides to launch a process, starting from June would be approximately 18 to 24 months, because there's a lot of work that we, the advisors, have to do, a lot of communication that we have to have with the working group of the city, which are the designees of the city that are working with us, or we're working with them, to decide whether or not to proceed, and then if they proceed, to proceed down the path of conducting a process to lease the airport. And so that's where we are today. And I guess I think that's really about it in terms of where we are in the process. I don't know if I missed anything that you'd like me to cover.
No, you were very concise in your explanation, I appreciate that. The fact that we've only, Paul, you helped me. Did we sign the contract in August?
Yeah, it was the end of July, I believe.
End of July, but the very end of July.
Right.
Yeah, the very end of July, because we had our first meeting in August.
Right.
So we had our first meeting in August,
That's
so we really haven't had opportunity to do much other than gather ourselves, set a plan, and move forward on collecting some data. So I appreciate that. So basically, that covers the part of this process that probably is one of the most important parts, which is determining whether or not the economics make sense to do anything different. And if it doesn't, we won't. So that's very important to know. Lon, you're gonna do communications?
Yes, ma'am.
All right,
Well, if it's all right, Madam Chairman, I wanted to just hand out a few things if it's possible.
go right ahead.
It's basically the door knocker that we're on the doors with.
Okay,
And also the latest version of the approved outreach plan.
Okay.
So this is all public information, but I just want to make sure everyone had it if you want a copy of it. So you could, if we make reference to, because I know a lot of folks, there've been questions, just not familiar with the material that we're using while we're on the doors. So I just want everyone to see it. so they can have it and see it for themselves.
Here, get that.
Does anyone else need a copy? And Madam Chairwoman, I just shared two different things. The first is the outreach plan. This is the final version of the approved, and it still says draft because outreach plans, like anything else,
They're
are
fluid.
working. They're fluid. They're very fluid. And we had feedback from the entire working group on this plan, and like I said, if something comes up that requires a change, we will change it. But we tried to include every aspect of the community, and we wanted to start with talking to the residents of St. Louis because they are the owners of the airport. And we try to do it in the most diplomatic way possible. And we're going through all 28 wards and how we broke this up into 3 different segments, north, central, and south. And we randomly put them in 3 different buckets. So to take any bias inside of what ward you think would think one way versus another ward, how they would think another way. And randomly pulled them out and we put them on the board, and that's the order of how we are going across the city. And our goal, with the goal of hitting 100,000 doors, we've already hit over 25,000 doors. And we're trying to talk to at least 20,000 residents, and we're right now at about 2,500 residents, and that was as of this weekend.
Are you doing north independently, or are you doing all 3 wards at the same time?
All 3 wards at the same time. So there's a field team in the north, in the central, and the south. And the unique thing about those teams too, our south side team is mostly south side residents. Our central team are mostly central residents, and our northern team are mostly northern residents. We wanted to have the neighbor feeling. We want folks to understand the community and different pockets of it, their particular areas. So we're doing all 3 wards. We're doing north, a central, and a south simultaneously.
Okay. I had a resident in my neighborhood meeting in Gate District, and I asked the question, did she think that the survey was too long? And she said no. I was like, oh, okay. And then another one brought this with me. They had missed her door, and she said, I like that information on the back, but at the end of the day, she said, I really want to talk to somebody. I said, okay, and I'm gonna give you her name, make sure you all go back and knock on her door.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I want people to be happy,
Yes, ma'am.
okay?
One other thing about this is that the folks that are out in the field, they're not leaning anyway. This is what they present with, and they talk about these 11 guiding principles, and this is what they talk about. And if the conversation goes away, their job is to be objective as possible.
Right.
Just to gather information, and that information is to be, whether good or bad, we take that all, and their job is not to sway any opinion either way.
Okay, share a little bit more about, when I looked at here in your timeline, share a little bit more about what is expected to happen through December.
Yes, ma'am. Well, we're gonna continue out in the wards, knocking on all the doors so we can complete. Our goal is to go over the city at least 3 times by the end of the year. Simultaneously, starting in October, we're gonna start focusing more on the community, large group meetings, and you will see some of these advertisements that are out, and we'll do a courtesy email to, if we're in your ward, if we're gonna do a group meeting in any of the wards, to let the aldermen or alderwomen know that we're gonna be in their ward ahead of time. Also, there's gonna be a regional poll that will, if it's approved by the working group, will go out shortly. That'll be the first opportunity where the same polling questions are going from the city as well as county residents, users of the airport. And that should come out in the next 2 weeks, whatever the working group approves the final questions. And then our plan is just to hear from 20,000, that's our goal, is 20,000 residents in between now and the end of the year. And we are flexible. If you have a community meeting, if anyone has a community meeting that wants us to attend, we'll be more than happy to attend, to hand out literature and to talk to residents.
Okay. One of the things that I think a lot of people have a little angst about is, what decisions are you making, okay? And so what I want to clarify a little bit more is that the working group, on behalf of the city, has ultimate approval on what you will disseminate to the public.
Yes, ma'am.
That's very, very important for everybody to know, because we kind of cut this up, didn't we?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we did. So we came to a conclusion of what we believe was the best thing to go out. And we've even looked at the survey again. So I think we're gonna be taking a few more questions off of the survey because it appeared as though some of those were redundant and could possibly be asked that way. And we don't wanna try to lead anybody anywhere. So a couple of more questions will be coming off of the survey.
One thing I would like to also point out, if I may, is that we do have a website, fly314.com, not only on the flyer, but we do invite individuals in the community to take a look at our website. We try to be transparent in everything that we do. So any of the meetings in which we are participating, we make sure that we put those on the website. We also direct and would ask anyone that would like to provide comments to us that they can do so on the website as well. So the goal of this is to make sure that we are fully transparent in the process, that we are communicating with the community, and we are inviting the community to communicate with us as well.
And to add to that, on the website, we are actually, we take the meetings
Yes,
and they're transcribed.
yes.
So I think that's important for people too.
That's good.
So at their leisure, they can take time and go through it and learn and understand exactly where we are and what we're doing.
Absolutely. Thanks for
So we're
pointing that
not doing anything behind closed doors that, and somebody said something about going into an executive session. But you have to understand that at some point, we're talking about contracts and leases, and those are private things, because we are not doing this expiration to jeopardize anybody's business. And so you should not be doing that in public. Nobody does it in public, anywhere in the world, dealing with contracts and leases and money. So you have to really understand that. That will not be talked about in public. And at any point that you see on a meeting notice, where we say, at the bottom of the notice, we may go into executive session, that's just there so that you can have the opportunity in case questions come up or we identify a problem that we need to talk about, that we can. Because again, according to our laws of the state, and then probably anywhere, you have to advertise ahead of time that you may go into executive session. So that is important for that to be on the agenda early, in the beginning. You can't just decide in the middle of a meeting, oh, let's just go into executive session. The public needs to know that that is a possibility. So hopefully, that explanation, because I know that some people who are not used to these types of meetings and types of processes don't understand it and may come to a conclusion that you're trying to hide something. Well, that is not the case. And we want to talk about that over and over again so that people will feel comfortable and know and understand why it's being done. There's, what else? There's something else on here. I was looking at this earlier. Can you explain on page 4 how you came to having these numbers for
Yes,
your
ma'am.
potential goals?
Yes, ma'am. The numbers came from historical census and election data. And we just put them in chronological order because it was just the easiest way to show them, not leaning toward any ward, but basically looking at the past census and voter turnout were the two guiding, because we just needed a place where we could find numbers, and so those are the two places that we went to.
Okay, because I didn't want people to think that you just made up numbers and put them on there.
Come in.
Okay, all right. What I'd like to do now, if you have nothing else that you'd like to present, I'd like to open it up for our committee persons to ask questions, please. So, Alderman McCarroll.
I do have questions. And so anyway, Grove St. Louis, who funds that?
Yeah, Grow, Missouri.
Grow, Missouri.
Grow,
I'm sorry,
Missouri.
Grow, Missouri, I'm
Grow,
sorry.
Missouri. It's funded by several different folks, but I guess the one you're probably getting at is does
It's
Rex
Rex
Singfield
Singfield.
fund it? He funds a portion of it, yes.
Okay, because that's what I see. Then, the cost per month, of this is what? I heard the number, but I'd like to hear it from you guys. I hear the number is a pretty outrageous amount every month.
You mean the cost to operate this?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know that I have the exact cost in front of me. It is a large cost, as we have a number of consultants that are working on this particular project with us. And so there is some funding, but that is not anything that is paid for by the city.
Well,
So the
but-
city is not paying for any of those costs at all at this point.
But at this point,
Well, the city is not paying for it.
my understanding is if they find someone, they're, I guess, gonna pay it, that leases the airport. But what happens if we put something on a ballot that says it has to go to a vote of the people and we stop it? Is the city gonna be liable for that money?
No,
that's
the
being
city
put
is
out?
not liable for that.
So if it doesn't go anywhere, or the board, we stop it, or anything like that, who eats all that?
The city is not responsible for any of those funds, so
Okay, but who eats all that?
at this point, it would be the person who is.
Grow Missouri, Grow Missouri. would-
Basically,
would
Grow
need to come.
Missouri, I mean, the person who's funding the Grow Missouri project would at that point. So the city is not on the hook, the city is not liable for this project during this phase, so.
The only time that a payment is made, payment will only be made to the advisors from another source from the proceeds of a transaction if one
If it's-
closes.
But what if it doesn't close?
Then
Then-
it's just as Stephanie said.
Yeah, just as I mentioned before, that the city would not be responsible in any way. And that was the risk that we wanted to take for the benefit of the city of St. Louis in terms of putting this project in front of the city. So we were not doing that for the purposes of the city having to take that risk. And we were not doing that for the purposes of the city having to pay those expenses.
And the contract is, I think it's on the website
It
too as
is.
well. So
Yeah.
you can take a look at the contract to see what the contract with Grow Missouri is on the website.
I just, I don't want to get to a point where we put this on a ballot, it gets ended or killed, and there's
And then
something
you're
in there that
responsible.
says, gee, you know
Right.
what? You didn't live up to your part of this contract.
That's a very good question, but
Well-
hopefully we've been able to
Well, yeah, but I
ease your mind
mean-
on that.
I think the
And I'd
city
have
is
to read the
fully,
contract, or
Yeah,
have
right.
somebody
Yeah,
read it.
Please, yeah.
That can explain it to me, but it would seem to me that if we're not honoring our part of that contract and stop the process because we feel it's not the way to go, I'd like to know that that contract for sure says we're not gonna be in violation of the contract and liable for all these charges.
yeah, I believe the city has done a good job of protecting itself
Right.
against that risk.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that was really it. I mean, I'm just more curious about it.
Okay, all right, Alderman Cone?
So the numbers that Alderwoman Davis referenced on the back in terms of, your potential goals to get to
Right.
20,000 people.
Right.
I realize that this is based off of, your voter files, but it's not necessarily reflective of the population of the city as a whole. I'll use my ward as an example. You all have 390 people as your target for the number of people that, you want to make contact with in the
Right.
25th ward. The 25th ward is one of the most densely populated neighborhoods in the entire
It is.
city of St. Louis. 30% of the population is underneath the age of 18. Lots of families, AKA, that live in the 25th ward. And one of the largest, if not the largest, immigrant community in the entire region. And so, to say that you're only going to reach out to 390 people when those 390 people, potentially reflect, the greatest amount of diversity that you would see anywhere in the St. Louis region, and to leave their voices out because they're certainly under-reflected when you look at, the 16th ward would have 1,300 people, the 23rd ward would have, 1,100 people, the 28th ward would have 1,100 people, the 8th ward would have 1,100 people. You know, and then all of North St. Louis is right around 500, you know, people per ward. I just don't think that that's an equitable way to get feedback on this project.
Can I weigh into that? And, and
certainly may.
Alderman, I get it,
It's only
25th
one of
is
the
very,
process.
is very, and it was a way to come up with goals. When we get to 390 doors, we don't stop. We're gonna knock on every door 3 times through the city. So if we talk to 500 people from the 25th, I would love it, you know, but still, you have to start somewhere, and this is the goal. But we're not walking away from doors when they hit a number. Matter of fact, the folks that are knocking on doors don't even know these numbers.
Are they knocking on doors just purely based off of a voter database?
No, they're knocking on every door in the ward. The voter database, what it helps you, and this is the actual reflection of number, because you want to be able to contact that person again, or later on, the FAA may say, hey, this may be bogus information. Who's on the other end of this? We want to make sure we can tie it back, and that's the easiest way of doing it. Not the only way, but that's the easiest way of doing it.
Yeah.
We're talking to
If you're
everyone.
using,
Yeah.
you know, a voter database to do community outreach, you're going to miss students, you're going to miss immigrants, you're going to, you know, miss younger people. You know, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity that's going to be missed if.
We
So
have
I
an
think your point
opportunity,
is-
and the software we're using, we have an opportunity to add folks in. You see, this is just the starting point. Like I said, we're gonna hit every door in your ward and at least 3 times. And if we get over 390, that's fine, but this is just the starting point, and that's where it is. And that's how we had to break 20,000 down. I'm a military guy, and this is how you start somewhere. And you break things down, break your big goals down as small as you can, and then you go after it. And then you're gonna adjust. That's why this is, like I said, a draft plan. And if we figure out that that's a better place to be, we're gonna go. Because our job is to get to 20,000, but we wanna make sure that there's some goal that to start with. Because going in with a project this large without a goal is a super mistake.
Yeah, but
anyway.
I don't want the data behind that goal to be driven by data that's not going to be reflective
Okay.
of the communities in which we represent.
That's fair.
I think your point
Fair.
is very well taken, and we'll certainly take that information back to our team. Keep in mind that, and I think Lawan's point is, when we look at the percentage or the population in a particular ward as a whole, so you have that particular number, and then you look at the next point is the voting population. And so we wanted to try to make sure that we hit at least the voting population. That does not mean that those are the targeted individuals that we would hit. We're gonna look at everybody in that ward, but we wanna at least reach that number. So I think the point we're saying is at least, it is not the maximum of where we're trying to hit in any particular ward. And so if that point is misleading, we can certainly adjust our reflection so that it does not appear to be misleading to anyone in that regard.
Yeah. I'll reserve most of my other questions for another point in time, but just I guess a request. If we are going to, as a committee, continue to have meetings involving, you know, the motley crew that's around us at the moment, I would really like to be in a bigger conference room.
Okay.
Because it's very uncomfortable having people on my backside who I don't know is sitting behind me. And, you know, this room is not very well ventilated on top of it. And then if we have the continual addition of 2 additional cameramen in this room, it would be very nice to be in some place where it's a little bit more laid out versus around, but, yeah.
You know me, Sharon.
I'm not saying that I don't know the people currently sitting behind me. I did take a swivel around to, you know, make sure I knew who was behind me. But I just, you know, if we're going to continually have a large group of people, you know, attending, you know, these meetings, I think it would be helpful if we were in a more constructive setting, which would be more comfortable as well.
Okay,
So,
we'll definitely do that.
thank you.
Okay.
I actually have to take off.
All right, so thank you. So, Alderwoman Gracia. You have any
Thank you.
questions?
The 100,000 doors that you're knocking on, where did you get that number from?
Just trying to get to 20,000 is more of a, how do I back into 20,000? So, if with a contact rate of 20%, you would think, so that's how you get up to 100,000. So it was more of getting to 20,000, and that number was, what's a substantial amount of number if the FAA came back to challenge us? What's a big number? And so 20,000 was the number we came up with.
Okay.
And so that's how we broke
And
it
20,000
down.
is like a percentage of what?
It's just it's not a percentage of the population, it's just 20,000. Like, what's gonna like, if the FAA said that you guys actually went and talked to the residents of St. Louis about this project, how many is enough? FAA didn't, it wasn't a back and forth, it was like 20,000 was our number, because we just internally felt that's a big number.
So you're
and
not
how to get
talking
there.
about like statistical, like,
Not when it comes to the
relevance
20,000, no,
okay.
right.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Rice?
Yes, thank you so much for coming. So one of the, I was looking at the website and the map that shows where folks have gone, and my ward is nice and empty in the middle
Yeah.
at the moment, and I figured you're just coming to it, but I wonder, I share Alderman Cohn's concerns. I do have one of the higher voting population wards, but what we know is that the city is made up of a lot more people than just the ones who vote regularly, vote frequently. And those folks need to be engaged because they also pay. I mean, this is a municipal owned, this is a public owned entity. So just echoing that we absolutely need to be doing that, and this is the kind of thing, just looking at this chart, that makes people already feel out of the loop. So there's that, and then the question of using the voter files to do that. Well, if we're just looking at voters, are you just preparing for a vote, right? Are you preparing for the potential to vote on this?
It's the best information that you can, it's readily accessible. Put it like that, with actually, and no file is gonna be perfect, but at least you have some of the background information on who those folks are. Because like I said, we want it audit proof. That's our goal of it, is that we want a process that you're gonna believe in, and there's a person that's actually at the end of that survey. And so for the integrity of it, it was the easiest and best data you can get, because voter files go back pretty good, and St. Louis does a very good job, and the state of Missouri does for that matter, in keeping up with voters. And so it was just a good way to validate information. But like I said, they have the ability to add folks to it. You run into someone on the street, you're not walking away from them. You want to engage that person as well, and we'll add that information too. But you need a starting point, and that's one of the best files you can use in order to just, get information.
So these are being left on all of the doors that folks aren't able to actually have contact with a person, right? Or probably handed to someone if
Right,
they're
we
actually
talk-
at the door.
correct.
So is there, the data that's being collected, what is it being collected on? Is it like a survey that folks are being asked of? Are we able to see that?
It hasn't been, the latest report has not been approved through, but we will, we will get it through the committee chairwoman if you guys want to see it. It's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
And like I said, they did a great job of just making sure that the questions are very balanced and not leaning in any way.
Okay.
A lot of it's demographic information, but if the working group's okay with it, it's something that we should.
I figure if you've already attempted to talk to 25,000 people,
Right.
it would be great
Probably heard it,
to
yeah.
see that. And because this door hanger, one of the things that you mentioned when you were exploring this is financially, if it's better for the city to not do this, then what are our economic development goals as a city if we continue to own the airport ourselves? But this doesn't say anything about that.
Right.
This doesn't
Purposely.
say, so it feels a little skewed to say, well, if you had an option for the city to go forward and advocate for economic development of something that we own without having to lease it, seems like a valid question to people. Would you rather own this or have another company in here?
Right. The point, so when we went through that, and that was one of the topics that the working group went round and round and round about, of talking about the use of proceeds, or if there's no other proceeds that come in. But we felt that it's too premature right now because the city is not decided if they're going to do anything with it yet. So right now, we were really just gauging if folks know anything about it, and are these things important to you. Not leaning them, because if you go down, and I'm just using this for example, an area that could use a lot more development development may be a top issue for them, but may not so in another area that doesn't need it, maybe transportation. So it's not, we didn't want to go in and start guiding folks down that, because then that goes down another path that, oh wow, if all this money's coming, then we got to do a deal. That's not what we want to do in this, in any phase. That's not what I'm brought in to do. What we're brought in to do is an objective pulse based on the 11 principles, and just and without guiding the residents either way. But you brought up a great point. We went round and round and round and round and round about it. But we felt this was the best way of doing it without leading either way.
So there's not a question that says, do you believe in publicly owned assets, or just like something that is gauging a resident's personal
Right.
ownership in this.
Right.
No, so it's all focused on. Well, it's sort of objective, but objective leaving out the whole we want to continue to own this
Right.
as a city.
Well, there's some
perspective.
questions in there just talking about airport operation. I mean, do you mind that just are just let's say
You
generic,
can
but
talk about your questions.
yeah, how do you feel the airport's going right now, and then do you feel that it could be improved? And just to be candid, when everyone says that they like the airport, most of them, they're doing very well, but then they also say it could be improved. And a resident, I was on the door yesterday in my old neighborhood in the 27th, and the neighbor was telling me, I was like, how can you, this is a sidebar, like, how can you choose both? And they were just saying like, hey, I have a 2016 car, right? I love it. It gets me to work on time. It's very fuel efficient. But if the 2018 comes out, and if I have the money, I might want to get it too. And so this is how a neighbor was explaining this question to me, where you can rate both questions very positive. And I'm just saying, but it's a lot of thought that's going into, the surveys, where we're just trying not to be biased. But that was just something that jumped out at me right away of like,
Right.
not trying to lead them either way, but just wanted
Sure.
for my own understanding when we're out there on the doors of how can both questions be positive? Because you
Sure.
assume that if one's positive, the other one's gonna be negative, but that's not necessarily the case.
Right.
So they're getting asked questions about the airport and have they used the airport before? Because we want to gauge that too as well. Because, a lot of people that may benefit from this in the end, regardless if we do something or not do something, don't use the airport at all. So we have to be mindful of that. And so, we're trying our best, put it like that. We're trying our best to be objective, but you're bringing up great questions, and this working group has, like I said, gone, around and around, trying to figure out what's the best
Glenn,
way.
you understand that we're not gonna be talking about that, use of funds and all those things now, right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
We've been very engaged.
And again, all that's online, you can do that.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. And that's a good example of a question that I think anybody would say, of course, if it can be better, well, yeah, let's make it better, right? But who's under whose leadership, I think is that's really the crux of the issue. So, and then, so as far as the survey results, you're saying audit proof, so if the FAA wanted to come in and look at all of your data,
Right.
right? If they wanted to come back and check every survey response, this is the
Right.
door that this was taken at.
Yep.
So the FAA will be able to do that. Will that be, it's my understanding that that's not publicly available information because it's a private entity that's conducting this survey right now.
Well, there is inside they can check if they want us to share their information with the FAA. So we just can't voluntarily go to FAA and say, hey, we got all these surveys, you want to see
Sure.
them? But when we on the door, that's one of the things that we get a signature and a checkbox,
Okay.
if we could share that information with the FAA.
But if the FAA came back and wanted to audit everything, can they see everything, or only the ones that have the boxes checked?
That would be a question for attorneys.
Okay.
And I'm not
Sorry.
one, but that's what would go to the attorneys to look at that.
Okay,
But many people have checked the box and said that they are willing to share their information with the FAA.
okay. I think that's all the questions I have. I really would be interested in seeing the survey, if we can do that.
Oh, I think we should.
All right.
Okay.
That's a good one.
The last thing that I wanted to do, is I wanted to take an opportunity for you guys to stay here, but I wanted the working group to have opportunity to share
Okay.
with the aldermen that are here too. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
And so, again, for those who are not familiar with the process, there is a working group. So there's a representative from the comptroller's office, from the mayor's office, and from the president of the Board of Aldermen's office. And then I'm on there as the chair of the Transportation Committee. And we also have our financial consultant from the Board of Aldermen on that committee as well. So when we are looking at this, you have every entity of representation from the city side has a representative sitting there. And of course, our airport director is sitting there too. So we have, those who are in charge of the airport sitting there, those, the E&A, 3 representatives are sitting there, and the chair of transportation committee. So we're covering the bases to make sure that the knowledge is shared, number one. The persons who would most likely have the questions and need to make sure that this stays on the right track and is not convoluted in any way, they're sitting there. So I wanted to ask Paul, Rhonda, and Gerard to come and present their opinions of how this is operating and their responsibility for being on the working group.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. I actually wasn't prepared to do anything.
Always prepared. And for whatever reason, my communication process down here in the last couple of months has not been well. And so I don't have a representative from the comptroller's office here, and I don't like that fact that I don't. Okay.
Yeah, I can tell you and just sort of echo your comments about how the process has been. I was actually a latecomer to the process because once the contract was signed, I was put in this position of basically chairing the working group and participating with the other members as well. We've had, and as the chair indicated, we're meeting on a biweekly basis. Most of our meetings over at 1520 Market. Occasionally we'll be meeting at the airport if it's convenient for people flying in. I can tell you that we've just begun organizing how we tackle, which is a rather large project, and the aspects of it. We've broken up into various sort of work streams related to the individual work. For instance, with Rhonda's expertise in the operation of the airport, all the due diligence, pretty much the heavy lifting on all that has been falling on Rhonda, and she's participated in that. You just heard from the community outreach team. We also have, there's going to be a lot of negotiations between the airlines and the FAA and the other concessions and things like that, which is going to be ongoing. And as the chair indicated, some of that's going to be in closed session simply because that's proprietary information there. But in most cases, it's just going to be trying to come up with an agreement about what their expectations are out of this process and how we can accommodate them so that regardless of where this goes, what the expectations are. I do know that, or there's also, in the comptroller's office has been very closely associated with the debt, reviewing the debt portion of this piece. There's been some updates there in terms of trying to make sure that if this thing were to proceed, what would happen to the debt. In fact, we have a part of our guiding principles to pay that off. And so there's a lot of components there. We're just getting started into that. I think, and there's actually a meeting this afternoon to go through another piece of that, and we'll be discussing it. That's about where we're at. I can tell you, following the communications, we've had a lot of spirited discussions.
Yes, we have.
At those meetings. I think we've been frank with each other on those, and they've been responsive to this point, and so, and I expect that to continue, and actually welcome any input so that we can make sure that we're progressing in a way that is both open, transparent, and everyone sort of is comfortable with each step of the process as we proceed.
Rhonda?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Paul said, I chair the due diligence. Most of the work is being done by Antonio, who has uploaded thousands and thousands of documents. What I can tell you is that I do think the due diligence is going well. I mean, they're trying to understand how the airport currently operates. They're trying to understand all the agreements that we have. We don't just have one agreement, we have thousands of agreements, as most of your board sees throughout the year as well. So there is a lot that goes into the airport, there's a lot that goes into operating it. We are doing individual calls outside of the working group. We have one tomorrow to kind of walk through our capital improvement plan so that they can fully understand the $170 million CIP that we currently have, how that's being funded. So we are doing a lot of work with Glenn's team and with John Schmidt's team, which is Mayor Brown Group out of Chicago, just trying to understand the airport. So I think that's going well. It's a little frustrating, I think, sometimes for poor Antonio, because in addition to his thousands of other things, he has sort of been the one tasked with this. So grateful to all the work that he's been doing, as well as Jerry Beckman, who's our Deputy for Planning and Engineering. They obviously have an enormous amount going on right now with the environmental of the airport. So we do have a lot of environmental issues. That's no surprise to anybody here. And there's a team that's working on that. So there's a lot of time being spent with the environmental advisors, trying to get them to, or help them understand all of the challenges we have with the environmental side and where that's at. So I think that it is I think we wouldn't want the process not to have that, because it shows us at least that there is an in-depth look, not just a superficial look at everything that the airport's doing. So we're pleased about that process, and we're pleased, despite the workload, that they are taking a deep look at it. I will echo what Paul says. Most of us on the working group haven't been shy about things that we don't agree with, bringing them to the surface and trying to find a solution that we can all live with in trying to get through this. I think, the process started not in a positive manner, and those of us involved with it wanted to make sure that the public knows that going forward, it will be a very transparent process. So we are vocal. We haven't been hesitant about that, and I think we will all continue, at least on our end, I think we'll continue to be that way, just to make sure that we're comfortable that everything's being followed and everything's being transparent.
I agree. George?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. My role on the team is overseeing the market work stream with Paul. And the market work stream is really overseeing the RFP and RFQ process. If we do get to that process of actually putting out an RFP or RFQ to receive bids. Right now, obviously, we're at the very end of the process. So there are a lot of tombstones that have to be accomplished and signed off before we can get to that point. So a lot of what we're doing right now is, one, communicating with the investment community, keeping them up to speed on what the process is, where we are, what the projected timetables are, answering any preliminary questions they may have. And then also from our side, really getting an understanding what that universe looks like. Who would be the potential bidders for the airport? As you probably would guess, it's going to be a syndicate. Who are the potential operators, right? There's going to be obviously financial partners as well as actual operating partners, who they are, what is the level of interest. But again, we're at the very end of the process. There are a lot of hurdles that have to be accomplished and decisions have to be made before we would even consider issuing an RFP or RFQ.
And I'm gonna say something. You just said we're at the end of the process.
No, I said the beginning. I said there's.
You said it.
No, I'm sorry.
At least 4 times you said it. You know, I was a great debater. So I'll listen to every word so I can get you.
Right. So I apologize. I mean, the beginning of the process.
Okay, all right, extremely. Okay, so, I'm upset with myself, and I'm gonna apologize publicly, because all of the different memos that were going back and forth, my ability not to get quorums, I think 3 times, I probably lost the comptroller's office in being here today. And the comptroller's office, the representative Jim Garavelli, has been a very strong partner on the working group. I totally respect the comptroller. Most of the public knows her position at this point. But my position in understanding the comptroller is that she is our watchdog. And it's not necessary for the comptroller to point out to the public in the beginning of any process that she is on board. Because her job is to know where we are at the end and make the determination whether or not it is best for the city of St. Louis. So, most people don't understand that, and most people try to pressure her, having a position on something, and that is not that role. That role doesn't require that. That role only requires her to be on point, protecting our funds, investing them properly, and knowing whether or not we are in trouble, and then helping us make decisions that keep us out of trouble. So, I respect that, and I appreciate Jim and his input in this process, and I know that at any point we're going down the wrong path, he's gonna speak up quickly and loudly, and so I'm happy for that part of it. I wanted to now make an opportunity here. We have about 15 minutes left for any of the aldermen to ask any additional questions you may have. Alderman Vaccaro?
Yeah, Rhonda. So, just piggybacking on what Alderwoman Rice had said. So, there needs to be improvement at the airport. What are you not doing? I mean, obviously, you've been in charge of the airport, and do you see this as something you could have did better, or are you seeing this as it's as good as it's gonna get, and nobody can come in and do a better job?
Yeah. So one of the things, and I probably failed to say this while we were just giving a little bit of an update, is that, you know, we as the team at the airport have made very certain that we look at this process as a separate entity, and in no way, shape, or form have we not continued to run the airport to the best of our ability. So I think that's something, I don't want people to think that we're stopping things at the airport or that we're continuing. We are, and, you know, we'll have some additional things coming forward here in the coming weeks that we'll be announcing as well. So, you know, I think we have come a long way at the airport. I think that we have tried to engage the community through our strategic plan, through this board, which I think is much more active than it's ever been, and trying to ensure that we're meeting what the public is asking us to meet. So from that perspective, I think we're doing everything we can as a team.
I mean, you might be missing my question. What do you, I guess I could pose it differently. What can they do differently that's gonna make things better than you are doing or are incapable of doing?
You know, I can't answer that question. I think that's what the process will tell us. Are there things? Obviously, if I had an open checkbook,
For sure.
there's things I would do. We don't have an open checkbook.
What would
So
that be?
You know, I mean, if you take a look, I'm not saying that we couldn't use a new hangar facility. I'm not saying we couldn't, you know, there's other things that would be on the wish list down the road, and ultimately, you know, it would be our hope that we can get to those things eventually.
But a new hangar isn't gonna bring more people into the city. It's always flights, and flights that originate out of St. Louis, you know, flights trying to get people to get on them. The airlines are gonna come to wherever there's people. So a new hangar, you know, you could paint the place, put a new hangar. Hey, it looks pretty nice, but you can paint it, you can put a new hangar, you can do all you want. It's not gonna bring in more airlines.
Right, and I think, you know, until this region grows, you know, we can't grow people until the region grows. But the one thing that we have been doing at the airport is growing that connecting traffic back, and that's been part of our strategic plan to take a look and try to work, and Southwest has done that and looked at us, you know, so now we have 26% of our total passengers are connecting passengers. That puts us back to a connecting hub under the FAA standards. So, you know, we are working to try to grow the traffic, but you also have to work at everything else, not just growing the traffic. I mean.
And I understand, but even doing all that, I guess I don't see what an outside group can do differently. That, I guess, is probably my question. And then where are we ranked now?
In terms of.
Airlines, airports.
So in terms of enplanements, passengers, yeah, we're
Right.
31st in the United States.
31st in the
Yeah.
United States. And in the last, are we still dropping, or are we coming up? Have
No,
we come-
we have been coming up. I mean, we were below that and we've been coming up. I think, you know, last year we saw about 1 million in passenger enplanement, or total passenger growth. This year, we'll see that again. So we should hit about 15.4 million passengers this year. I think that will probably keep us in the same spot. But, you know, I mean, relative to the positioning, I think we've got a pretty stable spot where we're at, but we are continuing to grow.
Okay, I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Alderwoman Gracia?
I don't have any questions, but thanks for the opportunity to be able to ask and for all the work all of you are doing. It's appreciated.
Okay. Alderwoman Rice?
I don't think I have any questions, but again, thank you so much for letting us be here and ask questions and for the presentation. And I'm excited about all the things that the airport is currently adding. And I think half of my neighborhood has been to Iceland already.
Yes.
And that's
awesome.
it seems like every weekend I'm scrolling through social media and next person is in Iceland. So I think St. Louis, we need some sort of sister city happening there. So thank you so much for that.
That's a good idea. It should become a sister city. What I wanted to do was, I wanted to bring back to the beginning of this process. So none of us were a part of the decision-making to even make the application, okay? Not even the current administration in the executive branch was a part of making that decision. But it was approved by FAA for us to follow this process. They looked at it. They looked at the guiding principles in which we applied for to work towards. And so the process is here. One of the things I'll share with you at our last commissioner meeting, and I listened to some of the executives of various corporations sitting there, and they talked about how this is not anything unknown to them or unfamiliar to them, because that's what corporations do. They go in and analyze who they are and what they're doing, and how they may do it better or not. And then I thought about my own background when I was at Ralston Purina. That's something we did on a regular basis. We had a team that did it. We went into departments, we audited what they were doing, how they were doing it, determined whether or not they should do something different or better, or eliminate the whole department. Sometimes that wasn't the answer. But that's what you do when you're running a business. And you also look at opportunity, and that's what this is. When this bill was passed, what was it, 1995 or 4, to give us opportunities to look at this?
The privatization program.
Privatization program. When it was passed to give us this opportunity, a number of airports have not taken the privilege of it, but just in this last 2 years, we have a lot of them trying to look at it, which is interesting. So now, we're gonna do our job. I'm just excited for the fact that what can come out of this is not only what we may or may not be able to do in a privatization mode, but it also gives us direct information on what we have accomplished, the speed that we accomplished it, the method that we use to accomplish it, and how we may be able to do some things differently with or without privatization. It doesn't matter. When you look at your operation to determine the efficiency of it, that's critical. And with something this large that you're responsible for, there's nothing wrong with looking at it. So what I want to do is to make sure it's a fair and open process, that people are engaged in it. I got a really hot email one night, and the lady told me I shouldn't even support this in any kind of way. After my response, she said, "You keep doing what you're doing, and I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing, and I like you." I was like, because I shared with her, I have no ultimate goal for myself in this. It's a process. I'm gonna be a part of the process. I want her to stay present in the process. I shared with her how to look online and follow it. You can follow it daily. If any new documents go online, you can look at it daily. And so I want people to feel that comfortable about it, and for us to determine what may be the best opportunities for this city. I also want to share at the end here that there's been a lot of rush excitement going on. This could be as long as 24 months, which means 2 years. Everybody needs to calm down and take time to understand and to be responsible in the process. So there's no hurry up to do anything. And if nothing else, if it ever gets in the wrong position, and I've shared this already, if it ever gets itself in the wrong position, I'll be the first one to say it and the first one to walk out the door and never come back in it. So we need to make sure that we are all as responsible as we can be. It's a little bit of extra work. I know that. I know it is. But think about this. If you had never taken time to really explore it at the level that we're exploring, we could be missing some things that we probably could be doing. Because I know how busy you are every day running the airport. That's a task to do that. But whether you like the individual who has some of their money in this again, we just had an argument like this Friday on the board floor. You can't let personalities get into business. You don't have to like or love an individual. You don't even have to talk to them, just deal with them on paper. But business is business. And that's how we've got to conduct ourselves from this point forward. So I really want to thank everybody for coming in, taking extra time today for this process. I wanted to recognize the president of the NAACP, Adolphus Pruitt, because I know he's going to be looking over our shoulder. And if necessary, he's going to tap me on my shoulder and say, you better look at this. So I appreciate him being here. But we have a lot of work to do. Our meetings are public. We have one today at 1 o'clock. So I wish everybody well and thank you. Meeting adjourned.